Get your hands off me! This is my company too.
Was Aramide. Past tense.
You called me a footnote?
Because that's exactly what you are.
Then ask your lawyer whose signature is protecting that footnote. You signed papers you never read.
And you think a piece of paper scares me?
It should.
Whatever game you're playing, you've already lost.
No, Chukwudi. You should have read page 4.
Aramide's fingers dug into the boardroom doorframe as the security guard's grip tightened around her wrist. "Get your hands off me," she said, voice low, controlled. "This is my company too." "Was," Chukwudi said, from the head of the table, not even bothering to stand. "Past tense, Aramide. Escort her out." "You signed papers you never read," she shot back. "That's going to cost you more than you think." "Cost me?" he laughed, and 11 board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "You funded a struggling transport company 6 years ago. That doesn't make you a co-founder. That makes you a footnote." "A footnote with your signature on a shareholder agreement," Aramide said. "Ask your lawyer what that means before you humiliate yourself in front of your investors." For a second, just a second, something flickered across his face. Then it was gone, replaced by the cold, practiced smile he wore for cameras. "Take her out," he repeated. The security guard pulled her back through the double doors, and the last thing she saw before they shot was Chukwudi turning to Bayo, the board chairman, and saying something she couldn't hear. She didn't need to hear it. She already knew what he was building toward. If this is your first time watching, hit subscribe now. You don't want to miss where this story goes. Drop a like if you're already rooting for Aramide, and comment Team Aramide if you think Chukwudi is about to regret this. 6 years earlier, none of this would have seemed possible. "You want to give me your entire savings?" Chukwudi asked her that night, sitting across a plastic table in half-empty restaurant in Yaba, his old Hilux truck parked outside with a busted headlight. "Aramide, I could lose it all. I could lose your money." "Then we lose it together," she said, sliding the folder across the table. "But I want it in writing, not because I don't trust you, because business and love shouldn't share a bed without a contract." He stared at her for a long moment, then laughed, the real laugh, not the boardroom one. "You're serious?" "Sign it or I keep my money and you keep struggling," she said, smiling. He signed it that night, right there on the plastic table, and when he looked up at her afterwards, something in his eyes had shifted. He reached across, cupped her face, and kissed her, slow, certain, like he'd been waiting to do it since the day they met. She kissed him back, fingers curling into his shirt, the restaurant noise fading around them until it was just the two of them, and a folded contract between 2 cups of cooling zobo. He whispered against her lips, "I'm going to build something, and you're going to be right there with me." "I'm already there," she said. "I never left." That was the Chukwudi she married. That was the man she believed in through 18-hour days, through missed rent, through nights when the business account read less than 5,000 naira, and he'd pace the room whispering numbers to himself like a prayer. She never asked for credit. She never needed her name on the door. She just needed him to remember what they built together. He didn't. In year 3, Chukwudi Logistics had 11 trucks and a government contract. In year 4, it had a Lagos Business Journal cover with his face on it. No mention of the woman who mortgaged her future for his. In year 5, the late nights stopped being about spreadsheets. "Who is she?" Aramide asked, one evening watching him adjust his tie in the mirror, cologne he never used to wear. "Who is who?" he said, not turning around. "The new head of client relations, Amarachi," she said the name carefully, testing it. "You mentioned her 4 times at dinner last week. I counted." "She's good at her job, Aramide. That's all this is." "Then why do you sound like you're convincing yourself and not me?" He turned then, jaw tight. "I don't have time for this tonight." "You never have time anymore. Not for me, not for questions, not for anything that isn't Chukwudi Logistics." Her voice cracked, just a slight one, and she hated that it did. "I gave you everything I had when nobody believed in you." "And I thanked you," he said, cold. "What more do you want, a plaque?" I want my husband back, the one who signed a contract on a plastic table and meant every word of it. He didn't answer. He grabbed his car keys and left, and Aramide stood in the doorway of the home they'd built together, watching his taillights disappear down the street, feeling something in her chest quietly rearrange itself into something harder. 3 weeks later, Amarachi moved a suitcase into the guest room. "It's temporary," Chukwudi said, not meeting Aramide's eyes. "Her apartment flooded. It's just until she finds somewhere else." "In our house?" "In my house," he corrected, and the word landed like a slap she felt in her spine. "I know a lot of things you think I don't," she said softly. He frowned at that, something uncertain crossing his face for the first time in months. But he didn't ask what she meant. He never asked. That was always his mistake, assuming her silence meant surrender, when really it meant she was still counting. If you're enjoying this so far, don't scroll past without hitting that subscribe button. Let us know in the comments what you think Aramide is hiding. Amarachi settled into the house like she'd always belonged there, rearranging the kitchen, laughing too loudly at Chukwudi's jokes, calling Aramide Madame with a smile sharp enough to cut. Aramide watched it all with the same unreadable calm she'd worn since the boardroom, because she knew something neither of them knew. She still had the folder, and she was about to remind Chukwudi exactly what was in it. The dinner was Chukwudi's idea, a small gathering for 3 of his biggest investors, held at the house, with Amarachi seated close enough to his right that nobody could pretend not to notice. "Aramide, darling, you should say something," Chukwudi said, swelling his wine, a performance for the table. "Tell everyone how you've contributed to the company's growth this year." The table went quiet. Aramide set down her fork, met his eyes, and didn't flinch. "I could," she said, "but I don't think tonight is the night for that conversation." "No, please," he smiled, the cold smile, the boardroom smile. "I insist. Enlighten us." "Chukwudi, don't do this," she said quietly, just for him. "Do what? I'm only asking my wife to justify her seat at my table." He turned to the investors, spreading his hands. "She used to help out years ago. Small things, nothing structural." Amarachi's laugh was soft, delighted, cruel. It's sweet that she still thinks of herself as part of the company. Aramide felt heat rise in her chest, but she kept her voice level. "I built the foundation this company stands on. I would be careful, Chukwudi, about what you're telling these people." "Careful?" He laughed, louder now, performing for his audience. "You want to threaten me in my own home?" "I'm not threatening you," she said, standing slowly, smoothing her dress. "I'm warning you. There's a difference, and you're about to learn it the hard way." "Get out," he said, the smile gone now, replaced with something uglier. The investors shifted, uncomfortable, eyes on their plates. Amarachi reached over and rested her hand on Chukwudi, a small, possessive gesture, deliberate and public. Aramide looked at that hand for a long moment. Then she looked at her husband. "You will regret this," she said, and walked out into the night air, her heels echoing against the marble floor, her heart hammering, but her spine straight. She didn't cry until she reached her car, and even then, it wasn't grief, it was fury, hot and clarifying, burning away the last soft places in her that still hoped he'd remember who she was to him. She called Rahama before she even started the engine. "He humiliated me in front of investors in our own house," Aramide said, voice shaking. "I'll kill him," Rahama said immediately. "I mean it, Aramide. I will drive there right now." "Don't. Just come over. I need to think." "Think about what? You've been sitting on that agreement for 6 years. Use it." "Not yet," Aramide said. "He hasn't shown me his full hand. When he does, I want to already be holding the winning one." 2 weeks later, he showed his hand. Aramide came home to find a courier waiting at the gate with a manila envelope. Divorce papers. No warning, no conversation, no attempt to sit across a table the way he once had with a folder and 2 cups of zobo. Just a stranger at her gate and Chukwudi's signature already on the dotted line, like she was a formality to be processed. She read every page standing in the driveway, the Lagos evening humming around her, Okada engines, a distant generator, someone's radio playing high life 2 compounds over. When she finished, she folded the papers neatly and walked inside, past Amarachi's shoes by the door, past the framed photo of Chukwudi's magazine cover that still hung in the hallway, and into the room that used to be her office before it became storage for things he no longer wanted to look at. She opened the safe. She took out the folder. She read the agreement one more time, though she had memorized every line of it years ago. 42%, her signature, his signature, dated and notarized, filed with the corporate registry the same week he'd signed it, back when he still thought her caution was cute. Comment below and let us know, do you think Chukwudi even remembers what he signed? Like this video if you think Aramide is about to change everything, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. The following morning, Chukwudi called an emergency board meeting. Word had reached him, vaguely, incompletely, that Aramide had been making calls. He wanted to control the narrative before she could. She's disgruntled, he told Bayo in the hallway outside the boardroom, straightening his jacket. Soon to be ex-wife looking for a payout. I want the board united before she tries anything. Chukwudi, Bayo said slowly. What exactly did she help fund in the beginning? Small money. Nothing that matters now, he waved a hand. The company is worth billions today because of decisions I made, not her. Bayo studied him for a long moment, something unreadable in his expression, but said nothing more. Inside, the room filled. Investors, department heads. Amarachi seated near the front now, in a blazer that mimicked authority she didn't have. Chukwudi stood at the head of the table, opened his mouth to begin, and the doors opened. Aramide walked in wearing the same calm she'd worn the day he humiliated her at dinner, a folder in her hand, and this time nobody moved to stop her. You can't just walk in here, Chukwudi said, but his voice had lost its edge, replaced with something thinner, more careful. I can, Aramide said, because I'm listed on your own shareholder registry. Would you like to check, or should I save everyone the trouble? She placed the folder on the table and slid it toward Bayo. The room watched in silence as he opened it, adjusted his glasses, and read. His face changed slowly. Surprise, then something colder, harder. Chukwudi, Bayo said, this is a certified shareholder agreement, 42%, dated 6 years ago, filed with the corporate registry. That's impossible, Chukwudi said, but even as the words left his mouth, Aramide watched the memory return to him. The plastic table, the zobo, the pen he signed without reading twice because he'd been so busy falling in love that night to think about paperwork. You signed it, she said quietly. I told you business and love shouldn't share a bed without a contract. Do you remember what you said back? He said nothing. You were serious, she continued. You were. I was. This changes nothing, Chukwudi said, but his voice cracked on the last word, and every investor at that table heard it crack. Your name is on a building funded partly with my money, built on decisions I sat beside you for, and legally, 30% of it isn't even fully yours to command without my sign-off. Aramide turned to the table. I'm not here to destroy what we built. I'm here to remind everyone who actually built it. Amarachi stood up abruptly, blazer sharp, voice sharper. This is absurd. She's clearly bitter about the divorce and trying to. Sit down, Bayo said, not even looking at her. You are not on this board. You don't get a vote in this conversation. Amarachi's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time since she'd moved into that guest room with her 2 big suitcases, she looked small. I've spoken to our legal team this morning, Aramide said, steady, unshaken. Given the misrepresentation Chukwudi made to this board about the company's ownership structure, and given his public statements at last month's dinner disparaging a shareholder he failed to disclose, I'll be filing for an emergency governance review. I'd rather we handle this like professionals, but I will do what is necessary. You're bluffing, Chukwudi said, though the words came out desperate now, not commanding. Call my lawyer and find out, she said, and turned to leave. If you've made it this far, you already know this story isn't done. Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't, and tell us in the comments, do you think the board sides with Aramide or protects Chukwudi? Within 72 hours, 2 of Chukwudi's biggest investors pulled their backing, citing concerns about leadership transparency. A third demanded an independent audit. The Lagos Business Journal, the same publication that once put Chukwudi Eyun on its cover, ran a new headline: Hidden Shareholder Emerges in Chukwudi Logistics Ownership Dispute. His phone didn't stop ringing. None of the calls were good news. Amarachi lasted 4 more days. I can't be associated with this mess, she told him, already packing the suitcase that once seemed so permanent. You told me you owned this company outright, Chukwudi. You lied to me too. Chukwudi, wait. She didn't sign up to be with a man the papers are calling a fraud, she said, zipping the bag shut. She left without looking back, and Chukwudi stood alone in a house that suddenly felt too large, too quiet, too full of things that reminded him of a woman he'd spent 6 years trying to convince himself he didn't need. Aramide, meanwhile, was in Bayo's office going over transition documents with a calm, methodical focus that surprised even her. You could have destroyed him publicly, Bayo said, watching her review the paperwork. Why the restraint? Aramide said, not looking up, because I'm not interested in revenge. I'm interested in what's mine. There's a difference, and it's the difference between building something that lasts and burning something down out of spite. The board wants to offer you the interim CEO position, Bayo said. Given the audit findings, given the shareholder structure, it's the responsible move for stability. Are you ready for that? Aramide finally looked up, something settling behind her eyes. Not triumph, not vindication, just quiet certainty. I'd been ready for 6 years, she said. I just didn't need anyone to know it yet. The company Aramide inherited control of was bleeding trust by the time she stepped into the CEO's office. The real one, not the corner office Chukwudi had occupied like a throne, but the modest room down the hall he'd never bothered to walk past. She didn't move into his chair right away. She sat in it only after she'd read every contract, every liability, every promise he'd made and broken in the 6 months since the board meeting that ended him. You're really doing this, Rahamos said, arms crossed, watching Aramide pin a new organizational chart to the wall. 6 months ago, you were being dragged out of a boardroom by security. 6 months ago, I let them think I was powerless, Aramide said. There's a difference between weakness and patience. I needed people to underestimate me long enough to move without resistance. And now nobody underestimates me twice. She rebuilt methodically, renegotiated the contracts investors had pulled, brought in new logistics partners who trusted her name more than they'd ever trusted Chukwudi's charm, restructured departments that were running on fear instead of function. Staff who once tiptoed around Chukwudi's temper found themselves, for the first time in years, working somewhere that felt stable. Revenue climbed. The Lagos Business Journal ran a follow-up piece 6 months later, this time her photo on the cover, her name in the headline, the woman who rebuilt what almost fell. Chukwudi watched it happen from a distance he'd never expected to occupy. Without the company, without Amarachi, without the image he'd spent years polishing, he found himself in a 2-bedroom flat in Yaba, not far, ironically, from the restaurant where it all started. He drank more than he used to. He called old friends who didn't call back. He watched his ex-wife's name climb higher every month while his own faded from every article that once celebrated him. It took him nearly a year to work up the courage to show up at her office. You look well, he said, standing awkwardly in the doorway of the office that used to be his. I am well, Aramide said, not standing, not offering him a seat. What do you want, Chukwudi? I made mistakes. I know that now. I let success change me. I let Amarachi change how I saw you. I was wrong about all of it. You were. She agreed simply. I'm not asking for the company back, he said quickly. I know that's gone. I'm asking for us, for another chance. I remember who we were, Aramide. That night at the restaurant, the way you looked at me like you actually believed in me. For a moment, something almost soft crossed her face, a flicker of the girl who handed a struggling man her entire savings because she believed he was worth the risk. But it passed as quickly as it came. replaced by the steadiness that had carried her through boardrooms and betrayal, and the slow, deliberate work of rebuilding herself from nothing. "I did believe in you," she said. "I believed in you when nobody else did. I gave you everything I had. Not just money, Chukwudi. My trust, my time, my loyalty. And you handed all of it away the moment it became inconvenient to remember where you came from. I know, I'm sorry, truly."
"I believe that you're sorry," she said. "But sorry doesn't undo humiliating me at my own dinner table. Sorry doesn't undo watching you sign papers to erase me without a conversation. I'm not the same woman who sat across from you with a folder and a hopeful heart. That woman doesn't exist anymore. You made sure of that. So that's it? After everything we built?" "I built it," she said gently. No cruelty in her voice, only finality. "I've forgiven you, Chukwudi, genuinely. But forgiveness isn't the same as going backward. I'm not interested in the seat across from me. I filled that seat with people who never made me question my worth." He stood there a long moment, searching her face for an opening that wasn't there. Then he nodded slowly, understanding settling over him like something final. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "you deserved better than what I gave you." "I know," Aramide said. "I gave it to myself instead." He left without another word. Aramide watched the door close behind her, then turned back to the reports on her desk. Expansion plans for 3 new states, a partnership meeting scheduled for the following week, a life entirely her own, built not on what was taken from her, but on what she'd refused to let go of. Rahama found her there an hour later, still working, calm and unbothered, exactly as she'd been every day since the boardroom door first slammed shut behind her. "How do you feel?" Rahama asked. "Light," Aramide said, signing the last document on her desk. For the first time in years, light. Outside her window, Lagos moved the way it always did. Okadas weaving through traffic, hawkers calling out prices, the city indifferent to the quiet revolutions happening inside its buildings. But inside that office, a woman who once was dragged out by security now sat exactly where she belonged, having proven, without needing to raise her voice, that the ones who underestimate quiet strength are always the ones who end up paying for it. If this story moved you, don't scroll away without hitting that subscribe button. There's so much more where this came from. Like this video if Aramide earned every bit of that office, and comment below to tell us where you're watching from tonight. We'll see you in the next one.